Okay, look, I just have one question. Seriously. Who threw the rock in the opening? Because I mean, like, the angels wouldn't have thrown that rock. Would they? Why? They would have no reason. But who the heck else would be there to throw the... I don't know. Hey, everybody! Overdue Doctor Who review time, and it's time for that most iconic of episodes, Blink. But before we get into it, this episode is sponsored by the podcast Radio vs. the Martians. It is a fantastic podcast. I listened to it even before they started sponsoring some of my videos, and because it's a podcast, you don't have to spend money on it. Give it a listen. You've got time in your life at work. You've got to drive. You're working out, something. Give a listen to Mike Gillis and Casey Doran because they are awesome. They're funny. They have smart guests. They talk about cool, nerdy stuff. Kind of like what I talk about. But, you don't have to see their faces, whereas you're kind of stuck with mine. But they're awesome stuff. Radio vs. the Martians, radioversusthemartians.com, and, of course, wherever you happen to get your podcast. I'm getting good at this. So, here we go, folks. Blink. This has always been one of those really super highly rated episodes. And, yeah, there's a good reason for that. I think this is probably Moffat's best timey-wimey episode, certainly, in terms of making use of the mechanics of time travel to tell a story in a different way. This is the tightest that certainly Moffat ever explored it. And I would say, like, maybe with the exception of some Big Finish stuff, probably the tightest exploration of that element of Doctor Who that might exist. It's really, really well pulled together. And it's also the sort of the quintessential Dr. Lite episode. He's barely in this. Yet his presence is felt throughout, and it still feels like Doctor Who from top to bottom, even without him. And it also helps that we have really great cast because we've got Sally and Larry. Now, Sally tends to get all the emphasis, so let me take a little time to talk about Larry. Larry's the kind of person I certainly was at some point in time that sort of, this thing, this geeky media, we're all going to talk about it online. And I still kind of do that, don't I? Oh, I haven't changed. In any case, I kind of like him. He's really sweet. He's really endearing. But then, Sally is a character who could have been really pretentious and potentially very grating, but, they got a fantastic actress to play her, so, hey, that works out really, really well. It's actually a really great cast all over. All the supporting characters as well are quite good. Even like Sally's friend who vanishes in the front end of the thing, she's great. Billy Shipton, both old and young version, and I kind of love the bit of trivia that the guy who played young Billy Shipton had to re-record all his dialogue and loop it over his original recording because the guy that got to be old Billy Shipton couldn't, he either couldn't or didn't. I can't remember if it was they didn't think to ask him to or he just couldn't mask his accent. But the actor who played Billy Shipton didn't play him with an accent, so he had to re-loop all of his dialogue with the accent to match the old version. I just kind of like that as a thing. But also, like, there's a wonderful sense of sadness to old Billy Shipton. He's got that one line, "Look at my hands. They're old man's hands. How did that happen?" And of course, Sally herself also has that sort of sense of that appreciation of she says it herself, sad is happy for deep people, which, like, as I said, in the hands of a lesser actress could have come across as really stupidly, self-indulgently insufferable kind of line, but no, it works. She's just able to give it that slight knowing smirk behind it, and is able to make it endearing and not infuriating. So she's a really terrific character, but let's talk about the Weeping Angels. Now, I'll get my chance later on to talk about the times when the weeping angels recur again. And some people will say that, they never should have been brought back. I'm not quite going to go that far because I do think we did get some good stuff out of their returns. Not across the board, but there's some really good moments that came out of their being reused. What I will say, though, is they were never going to be this scary again, because what makes them so scary is you don't know what's going on. You're just like, that statue moved, and I don't know why, and I don't like it. So, and that's not like they suddenly become unscary in the course of this episode, just when you find out what their deal is. But when they show up again later, you immediately know how they work. And while they've tweaked that a little bit, in various stories, the basic principle of just don't blink, and they can't get you. So that sort of initial, oh my God, what is going on? How do we stop it? How do we deal with it? How do we run from it even is gone. And that's kind of the inherent problem of anytime you bring back a legitimately scary monster is we've seen how it operates, so it can't catch us off guard, at the very least, not to the same extent, if it can do it at all. I mean, that's why they should never bring back, say, the Midnight Entity. That would be the worst idea ever. That said, I'll get my chance to talk about the Weeping Angels down the line in terms of some things about bringing them back that did work. But, for the most part, this is just a stellar debut for monsters. It is a really cool concept. And surprisingly, I like the explanation, because sometimes Doctor Who will explain a cool thing that, first of all, doesn't really need explanation, but the way that they'll explain it makes me kind of go, I kind of had that reaction to the Carrionites in Shakespeare Code. But here, they pick just the right jargon, I feel like. They're quantum locked. They feed off potential energy. They're I think he even says they're abstract life forms. This is nonsense, but it's perfectly worded nonsense. And so that's just terrific. And I cannot even begin to imagine trying to chart out that conversation with the DVD extra that Sally has, because you need to realize that conversation, the Doctor's end of it, a chunk of it has to play double duty and play just as well to a completely different set of responses that Sally gives when she first sees the thing, and they still have to work and make just as much sense for the actual responses she gives later. As somebody with writing ambitions who's written fiction and things of that nature, the idea of trying to just make that work and just chart that out and have that flow, that's just technically, narratively really impressive, aside from just being cool. Martha doesn't get a ton to do in this, but, I'm not sure there was a lot she could do. It's already a Dr. Light episode, but because so much revolves around the TARDIS and the angels looking for it, and we get, a little bit more of the Doctor interacting, he has a presence around it, whereas Martha basically just gets the occasional reminder that she exists. And while, that... I have complained and will probably continue to complain about the series' treatment of Martha as a character. This is a case where I'm not really sure there was a way around that, so that's just kind of what happens. She does have her nice little bits and moments of sass, ribbing the Doctor for the fact that she got a job and now she's supporting him, which was kind of cool and funny. And actually, since I mentioned funny, there's a surprising amount of humor in this. Oftentimes, scary and funny go together really well because humor is a great way to diffuse because building fear, when you do properly scary, not jump scare, but properly scary, the fear builds and you need to release that tension somehow. Otherwise you're just tense the whole time, and you can only be tense for so long before it becomes unpleasant, just as a way to be, and it taints your viewing. So if you're not going to relieve the tension with a scare, relieving it with a laugh, that'll get the job done as well. And there's a surprising amount of humor in this. it's quite a funny episode at times. Even in situations where things get quite dire, so I think that's another thing, that this is just really astoundingly well balanced, and I wish I had like something new or profound to say about this, like to the point that I almost was like, should I like try and come up with a contrarian opinion on this, just because everyone knows this is a great episode. Anyone who's ever talked about this episode talked about what a great episode it is. But the thing is, like, in my heart of hearts, I've got really nothing to say aside from the fact that this is a really great episode. So I think we will wrap things up on that particular note, folks. So, I know you've seen Blink. What did you think about it? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. A whole bunch of things to do. Buttons, links, link to Radio vs. the Martians, link to my Patreon, because I appreciate the help quite a bit. Other links besides to like stuff that I've written or social media or whatever. Go take a look at them. Click on things. Consider, doing the things that clicking on those takes you to. There's merch. There's other stuff. Or, don't click on any of it if you don't really want to. Because at the end of the day, folks, you're the council. I just run the meetings. And until next time, this council is adjourned.